Hi, everyone. I'm Summer,
I'm Carrie.
and this is Hopelexia Podcast.
Join us to talk about sex, drugs, and self improvement.
So I accidentally did something.
What'd you do?
Well, I made a video on our TikTok account.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perhaps naively thinking, because most of our videos we have had a very, very small follower count. Most of our videos get a very small number of views up until now. Um, so I made a quick update video about what's going on with me and my daughter because I keep getting messages like, hey, checking on you, blah, 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 because, I guess people care or want to know or whatever. So perhaps naively thinking that this video would go to approximately the same people that all the others have, I put this update video on there and I went to bed and I woke up with like thousands of notifications.
Oh no.
Oh, it's been a lot. So anyways, so a lot of people have asked, they're like, can you make a playlist? No, the answer is no. We can't make a playlist. You have to have 10,000 followers to make a playlist. We don't have that. But so I said, okay, we will make a video for the channel with the, TLDR of the situation with her. What I am willing to disclose, I do try to keep, most of her, the most personal information and try to, only talk about how it affects me. Because even though she has said she is fine with you sharing any and everything, as the adult, I don't think it's wise.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling with my shade here that balances my lights. I'm struggling with life right now, y'all. That's all I can say.
I think we all are as a people, just
like all of humanity.
Yeah. All of the universe and planet, just it's all hard. Everything's hard right now.
It's all very hard right now. And before we get started with the story, in the interest of full disclosure, I will say I deleted some comments because, as we all know on the internet, there are some people who are vicious.
Yeah.
And so there were some comments that I felt leaving there could potentially be harmful to people who do struggle with behavioral issues or mental illness, for them to see that, because legitimately some of them were horrifying, like
people
discussing like suggesting euthanasia. Yes, like they were awful. So I apologize to anybody who read those before I saw them, but I deleted them because they were.
What is wrong with people?
I have no answer for that, but yeah, some of them were horrifying. And like, if it were my personal account, on some of my personal accounts, historically, I had like would comment, why this is a bad thing, but yeah, my concern was because people follow the channel usually because they are struggling with things like mental health or, secondarily, have people in their lives who are. I was afraid leaving it could potentially have negative effects on other people reading it. So I did delete them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. People on the internet are brave with the things they say, like brave with the hate, brave with the bigotry.
Well, I wish I could say that it's just the internet. But I have had people like since all of this happened, and I am very guarded with who I tell what to. But sometimes there are things that are unavoidable, like, if people saw behaviors or whatever. And people have been pretty brutal in person as well over the years. People like to make suggestions on how you can parent, which, like, I get, they think that they can fix it. But then there have also been people who have suggested things like rehoming websites. And when I counter with, okay, what is the likelihood that somebody is going to agree to
Yeah.
what, like the chances of it being like a trafficking situation or an abusive situation are very high. And they literally have told me, so it gets her out of your house.
She's still a person.
Right. So then I'm concerned about this person who is commenting and their level of psychopathy, because like we should have, I'm like, honey, you need to be evaluated, because what you are saying to me right now is raising some red flags about a lack of empathy, because wow.
Like, she's still a person, and she's like a minor, like a child. Like,
Yes. And in this last several months with the highest security, like I've literally had people suggest to me, because I was running out of resources, literally to bring her home and to keep a gun in the house and to shoot her next time she attacks me. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you're suggesting I unalive my child? First of all, I don't think you understand, I'm not capable of that.
yeah.
Because I have had people do horrific things to me that I didn't have an attachment to, and I couldn't do that to them. How am I supposed to do that to somebody I legitimately love and care about?
Yeah, that's not something that a person that's in like a healthy state of mind like would think to do. Like, just unaliving people. Just,
I tell you what, my world has gotten very small in the last few years, just because of people
being terrible.
sort of outing themselves and raising concerns about, with things like that, because then I'm like, okay, I'm not sure you're a safe person for me or any of my children to be around. So yeah, my world has gotten very small as this has progressed.
Don't blame you. That's horrifying. Like, it makes me wonder like what they would do. Like, actually, I don't want to know.
No, like I tried thinking about it once, and it was just like all of the implications were horrifying to me. Yeah, and it made me very anxious, and I had to stop, because I'm like, does that mean you think you're capable of doing that to your child? And then I had concerns about their children, and then it was snowballing, and I had to like back up.
Yeah, like I even in all of like the jobs that I've had where I've had children try to like really hurt me and like would have done like whatever it is they were gonna do, it still never crossed my mind to like hurt them or like retaliate in any kind of situation. And I I don't understand like how people's brains go there, even if it's like an adult. Like,
I don't know. On one of the calls, one of the officers told me, which I know y'all don't have to go there to tell me about the rates of abuse with officers. I know, but one of them, that was his suggestion when she attacked me, was to essentially beat her ass like bad. He's like, drag her around by her leg all over the place and I'm like, he was getting very graphic. I said, I am not going to do that. Like, I will defend myself to stop the harm to me, but that's where it ends. I am not becoming the aggressor. That's just never going to happen. And if that's your only suggestion, I don't know that there's anything else we can do here.
Even if you were like ever to even like consider doing it, like just for like argument's sake, like it wouldn't affect her. Like,
no,
she doesn't respond to like pain, she doesn't have attachment, like,
right, it's not going to have that desired effect. Really,
it would just make her do it more. I feel like
make her angry, make her escalate the situation. Yeah,
I don't think
yeah, but I think this is what comes from a fundamental misunderstanding in the general public about psychopathy.
Yeah.
In fact, there's been a whole discussion on the Clock app about that because people have been, coming for me about using that term. It's outdated, it's stigmatizing, but it's the term that's used in research identifying this as a specific neurodevelopmental disorder. Using conduct disorder or antisocial personality disorder, the umbrella terms and categories only talk about a specific behavior pattern that can also be caused by other things. Like, we need to really start to look at the fact that this is a specific disorder related to the brain structure and processing that deserves resources directed at specifically studying and developing treatments. And we're not going to do that by pretending it's just part of these umbrella terms.
I think using more specific language like that, like, I know people don't like labels, but when it comes to like some mental health like diagnoses and like functions of the brain, like, it's way more helpful because you understand it more. Like, when you say like antisocial personality disorder, like, people are like, so you just don't like being around people, or you just like don't like people, like, what does that mean? Or like, when you say conduct disorder, they're like, so they just like fight a lot. Like, that's not
right. It's not specific enough.
Like,
right. And there's a huge spectrum under antisocial personality disorder, because of it, whether you're born with it versus having a brain injury versus trauma after you had developed empathy, the treatment varies widely depending on that, and the success of it varies widely depending on those details. And I think the mental health community is doing a disservice by continuing to bicker about the terminology instead of actually acknowledging this is something we need to look at. Like, they won't even make psychopathy an actual diagnosis. They argue about that every new DSM.
This DSM drives me crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I'm going to try to make this short for the summary of the timeline, because Carrie has read the synopsis I made for the court, and it was over 15 pages long with as little detail as possible. So I'm going to try not to take 2 hours here. So I've been marginally part of her life since before she was born. Okay, I was at that time foster mother of her older sister. They intended on removing her at birth and placing her with us with her sister. She went to a different state to try to evade the pickup order from child welfare. She didn't know where we lived at the time. Turns out we live very close to that state. So when child welfare sent a worker, they sent our worker, who then told her, hey, I'm your daughter's case worker. So then she knew approximately where we lived. And by the time she was discharged, a couple of days later, she lived about 12 miles away and requested that the case be moved. And so anyway, all the legal things that happens behind the scenes there. Ultimately, what happened, they left the baby with her and restarted the older child's foster care case. They had been about to terminate her rights, but you can't terminate on one and leave a newborn with her.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't make sense. Like, if she's unsafe for the newborn, if she's safe for the newborn, how do you say she's unsafe with the toddler? But they had in-home services. I think it has a different name now than it did then. But anyhow, they go in, they help teach parenting skills. They kind of observe and all of this. So they had all of this. So they know that she wasn't being neglected, because this is the one thing a lot of people are like, yeah, it's because of, neglect as an infant or whatever. They know she wasn't being neglected because they were there. They were making sure it was happening. At the time, she was living near a family member of her then partner, who was also helping as a caregiver to make sure the baby wasn't being neglected. So we did have sibling visits. So we did have some contact with her. So that is how we know that she had some symptoms from birth, because even as an infant, she did not have the normal engaging that is developmentally appropriate. There was not the normal interaction as a toddler. When we saw her, she didn't have the normal interaction, like the normal fear of strangers. What else is there? She didn't engage the same in a developmentally appropriate way with people. She was already showing oppositional defiance of, if my guardian tells me to do something, then I'm going to do the opposite just because they said to do it. She was showing that I don't even think she was 2 yet. Very early. She was a toddler. So child welfare was aware. My understanding from what they told me at the time is they told the family. She was assessed developmentally, as far as, intellectually. She was hitting all the milestones. So they didn't really know what was happening, but there's not much you can do, really, other than suggest the family get her involved in, some sort of therapy or something so that they can evaluate and try to figure it out, which didn't happen. But eventually I adopted her older sister. She's put in a, what is it called? Safety plan.
Mm-hmm.
When her mother went to jail, she went in a safety plan with a family member who moved, and then apparently child welfare was no longer supervising the safety plan for whatever reason. I don't know if they couldn't find her or what. But in any event, so there was a lost contact for, I guess that would be about 3 years. Then we find out she's in foster care. She had been in a placement already for about 6 months. So I didn't ask to move her because she settled. At the time, I didn't know that she didn't have attachments or anything. So the safe assumption was she's probably developed some sort of attachment here. I don't want to disrupt that because, multiple moves can be harmful. So what we did was I worked with the foster parents to set up sibling visits, because, the data shows that kids do better when they have the sibling relationship. A few months after that, a few months down the road there, the foster parents decided to request that she be removed from their home. So when she came for what was supposed to be her first overnight sibling visit, she came with all her things. The caseworker is basically asked if I would take her as a kinship placement because I do have, because her sister lived there, or otherwise she was taking her to a shelter.
About being put on the spot.
Right. Like, how am I supposed to say, yes, take a 5-year-old to the shelter?
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine. Even now, knowing everything that's happened, I just can't fathom myself ever saying, oh, yes, please take this preschooler to the shelter.
You'd be surprised how many, small kids end up in the shelters. It's too big of a number. There should be 0.
Well, I mean, she prefers the shelter, actually. So I guess it's a resource we probably should have for kids like her. But
there used to be some, but they shut them down for whatever reason.
Yes, because it's a bad look to the public. They don't think that any of these kids should be in shelters. So, but unfortunately, it actually is, or I don't know if that's even unfortunately, it actually is a decent model for kids like her who just find a more of a family setting to be something that escalates their behavior. So anyway, she moved in originally, and I'm seeing these indicators of some sort of something's off with attachment, with the way she interacts with people. complete flat affect. Now, I have, we've talked before, like I have autistic family members. I have an autistic son. We're not going to go into the fact that a lot of y'all think I'm autistic, and maybe I am. I don't know, but we'll talk about that a different day. So, like, I'm accustomed to flat affect, but there was something different about hers. Like, it was like when she's masking, she didn't understand emotions. She couldn't identify her own emotions, let alone anybody else's. Like, she doesn't have the same emotional range that we do, or intensity, right? Which I didn't understand as being possible at that time, let alone a characteristic that's typical of psychopathy. Because I didn't understand what the hell psychopathy was. Really, I had always been in all of my psychology and sociopathy, you know what I mean? Sociology. Classes and things, it had always been discussed as if they're the same thing, and the words are used interchangeably, and they're used under the umbrella term, which is very confusing and unhelpful. So I didn't understand that this is actually, about the structure of her brain. But I just knew something was off, so I got her into therapy. The assumption was reactive attachment disorder, because, some of those characteristics fit that, right? And she's in foster care, like, right? There's been disruptive
very common
changes in caregivers. Right. So statistically speaking, that is a much more likely cause. But then things were happening that were like, during attachment therapy, she didn't have the expected range of reactions that you would see either from, there's anxious attachment and there's avoidant attachment. Well, she wasn't exhibiting the expected range of reaction for either. She was just like, attachment at all was a foreign concept. Things like that. So we're like, okay, this is a little off, but we don't know what this is. But the therapist, helped me understand, like, how to parent as best we could, given the behaviors that we didn't understand, that we were seeing. So, which now I looked at and learned about what's called the decompression model, which they have used for juvenile psychopaths with some success, which, as it turns out, that's exactly what she was telling you to do. So good for her for being able to hone in on that one, because we could have been in a whole much worse place if she hadn't helped me do that. But yeah, ultimately we ended up scrapping the attachment therapy because she was completely like nothing. Like, there's no indication that she has or has ever had any capacity to attach. So we're like, okay, we're not going to push that. We're just going to, to work around her needs, which is what we've done, which is probably how we've gotten this far before this happened.
Yeah.
But there's always been things, a few episodes of cruelty to animals. She's never had friends because she has always bullied and abused every one of them that's tried to be her friend.
Yeah.
Stealing has been a continual issue since day one.
Like, outrageous amounts of stealing, like, from what you've told me.
It has been an issue at every single school she's ever been. Like, every single year I've had to go deal with the school about it. And I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do, honestly. And I've tried to be really upfront with them. Like, I don't know how to fix this. Like, the therapist has tried addressing it with her. Literally, if she has access to other people's things, she will take them. Like, I don't know how to solve that within your classroom.
Yeah, that's not like because you can't have eyes on her 24/7. Like,
right, and that was the problem, and that they never could figure it out either. Because what do you do? Like,
yeah,
there's just no way to prevent 100% of her access to other people's things. So it was a continual problem. There was also other behavior problems at school. If she didn't like what the teacher told her to do, she would go lock herself in the bathroom and refuse to come out. Because what are you going to do? Go drag her out physically? She knew that wasn't going to happen. She threw a desk at a teacher in third grade. There's been a lot of things. Hypersexualized behavior from like day one. So I don't know how far back that goes, but I've seen it from age 5. So, we don't know. I mean, the assumption, I don't have any answers before anybody asks, about prior abuse. I have no answers for that because she literally never disclosed anything and they never found any evidence of anything. But she did at one point say, when the therapist approached it a different way and says, look, I know that you were exposed to this sex offender. Did something happen? She's like, yeah, but she identified it as completely not traumatic. Like it was just a thing. So but we don't even know if that's true because the pathological lying, right? So it's always like she goes back and forth and you never know what's true, what's not.
She probably just, if it did like happen, she wouldn't have viewed it as like you said, she wouldn't have viewed it as like a trauma. So like she wouldn't know like other than like that's sex, like or like this
or
happened.
even it doesn't sex, right? Like because the way they process things, it can be different. So like she's had these instances of like where she reaches out, she searches out predatory adults online. She doesn't see it as her being exploited. It doesn't matter how you explain it to her, because she is getting what she wants out of it. So if it was a situation where like a groomer is like, you do this for me and you can get this, or, I'll do this nice thing for you, she likely wouldn't have processed it as trauma because it was just a currency to get what she wanted. So that's all speculation, of course. But so we don't know if there is actually any early trauma, because they try to do the ACEs scores and all of that. And the reality is we don't know if there was. But I know since she's been with me at 5, there hasn't for the last 10 years. But that's all I can speak to, is what I've been present for. But yeah, there's been a lot of, like you said, a lot of stealing the last couple years. There's been thousands and thousands of dollars. She likes to steal devices. She steals credit cards, steals debit cards. Money has never been safe around her. And just lots of things. But, we were just working with that and working around that. That was just kind of a reality, which seems a little surreal looking back and saying it like that, because I'm sure that sounds just bonkers to anyone else.
It does. Like, when I was reading that document, I was like, what the fuck? Like, the whole time I was like, I don't understand how any of y'all are like still like functioning like in a outside of that, like not even just like a healthy way, but like
at all.
I would have gone crazy. Like
it has had a lot. It has had a lot of strain. I mean, you guys, if you look at the videos, like look at me right now and go look at videos from just like 2 years ago, you can see how exponentially I've aged. And literally this situation is really the entire factor in that. Like, because everything else that's happened in my life has actually been less stress than prior to. This has been the primary stressor on everybody. And honestly, all 3 of my older children have moved out much earlier than planned because to provide them a buffer from her behavior. Yeah. That's why I've been so adamant about trying to, make sure my other kids had like a place to house, permanent housing to move into, so that they could as soon as they could, because that gave them, they're right down the road, they're close to me and I can help them, but it gave them a buffer and a place away from her. Unfortunately, my poor 11-year-old, she's been here since he was just turned 1, I believe. So, his whole life. So this is really complicated for him. He was afraid for her to come home. This most recent incident was the first one that he had actually witnessed. The rest of the police involved incidences, he was, we were able to have like another adult take him somewhere, do something, he wasn't there. So he didn't really see the full thing, and he didn't see all of this. He did not see her, attack me with the weapon. But he saw enough and to know that he didn't feel safe with her coming home either. So now he has a lot of complicated feelings because he's sad, he misses her, and he loves her, and he's sad, and he's confused about why would she want to hurt us. Because that's hard enough for adults to wrap our heads around, but for a kid his age, it's really, really hard.
Especially when it's like a sibling.
Yeah.
If it was like a friend, like it would still be like sad and hard, but like it's a sibling, like they're complicated.
Right. Plus, there's also the fear, right? Because child welfare had to do an investigation. Okay, so I guess I should see here's my little ADHD happening, right? Okay, so what happened was, so there's been multiple police involvement situations where she has been inpatient. She was inpatient 3 times last year, so we're talking 3 acute facilities and 2 residential. 3 acute, 2 residential, and then there was one that was like a 1-week program at a calm center. So then after the last one, we made a plan with the outpatient clinic because all of her behaviors and her desire to unalive me have all seemed to stem, according to what she has disclosed, from her thinking she's old enough to go move out, do whatever she wants, which I'm not even sure what that is, because like when we tried to explore that with her, like, what is it you want to do that you're not being allowed to do? There wasn't an answer. It's just literally I want to know that I'm the one in charge of myself, I guess. And so it's all, what she would say was, if I'm here, she believes I have the ability to find her, to look for her if she runs away. I'm not sure I have that superpower, but
you're
like
didn't you know?
Right. But I get it. Like, logically, I do get it. I do a lot of work with MMIW. We have helped organize community searches to find runaway teenagers and located them. So, like, I get logically where she's coming from. And so from what she said, if I'm not alive to look for her, she would have basically a head start to take off. I would couldn't look for her, and she would be able to go do whatever she wants, live under a bridge. I don't know. Because she didn't have like a fleshed out plan of what she wanted to do. So yeah, I don't know. So anyhow, we had created this plan with the outpatient clinic that, okay, fine, if being on your own is what you want, let's find a way to make that happen, right? When you turn 16, you're eligible for training programs like Job Corps, and then like what's called transitional services, which are generally for youth like 16 to 23, I think it is, or somewhere around about there. Where they give them housing for a certain amount of time and help them find jobs and things like that. And then, and they do life skills training and stuff too, to make sure they can take care of each other. And then to go on their own. So that was the plan we had made. You go to Job Corps, then if either, then we'll assess it. Like if you can self-support, we can look at emancipation. If not, we can look at transitional services. Then you can feel like you're, more on your own because you're not at home, here. But that's the plan I thought we had. That's what we were working towards. We had accelerated her high school learning. She did 3 semesters instead of 2 this last academic year because she wanted to move on towards that. Sometime around the end of the school year, I don't know, in May, she decided I don't know, she didn't want to do that anymore. It seemed to be, the catalyst seemed to be her sister graduating from Votech. She had also graduated high school early, went to Votech, and she graduated. And because of her behavior, she will set out to ruin any happy occasion that's not centered on her, right? So because of that, she was not invited to her sister's graduation. I messed up. I let her sign the card. It didn't occur to me that she didn't realize that her sister was graduating until that point. When I let her sign the card, I saw the change in her face. And she's like, oh, she's graduating? Right? I knew there was going to be consequences, but I hoped, the hope was, well, she's not going to the ceremony, so I will take the brunt of whatever the blow up is that happens. The next day, she stayed like in her room most of the time, which was really weird because usually we tend to be outdoor people. She usually spends most of the time outside. So I thought that was odd. I didn't really know what was happening, but okay. I would check on her. She was fine. Not going to start a fight. And so then the day after, she kept trying to bait me into a conflict by doing things like baiting the dogs to fight each other, all sorts of things. I'm like, okay, not going to escalate with her. I continually wouldn't go out there. I would just talk to her through the window or whatever, hey, can you do this, whatever, trying to hoping it'll blow over essentially.
Yeah.
And eventually she created a conflict out of nothing. I had her go get, she had stolen my Gorilla Glue and I needed it for a project. So I'm like, I need you to go get it. Well, I don't have it. I'm not saying you have it. I'm saying I can see that you used it yesterday. I can see that you used it. And so I need you to go get it from wherever you left it and bring it to me so I could go use it. Okay. She stomps off. She goes and gets it. Okay. Didn't say a word about the attitude, about any of that. She comes and she slams it down the table. I'm like, thank you. And I'm going to take it, and I start to take it into the house so I can use it on whatever. And she snaps at me, this is why I self-harm. Okay, that's out of left field. What are you talking about? What? Because I need to use my glue? I don't understand. Where am I missing this train of thought? Just the way you are. So my existence, I guess. But I'm like, no, we're not going to fight. Now, this should be, it's important to note for everybody, there's no evidence of her self-harming. The only time there has been substantiation of her self-harming, it has been where she can force me to watch it. And she has acknowledged in the past that she utilizes that as a way to try to hurt or upset me, because I can remove her ability to harm other people, but it's not like I can take her body away from her, right? And she knows it is hurtful and upsetting to me to see my children hurt. So, right? You would think it would upset most parents, right? It should. So in any event, I went in the house because I'm like, maybe if I keep not taking this bait, this will die down. So she goes into her room and she starts punching the wall over and over and over again. Okay, because she knows I'm going to have to step in at some point because she's going to hurt herself, and then we've got a whole issue. So I go and I tell her, you need to stop because you're gonna actually cause damage to yourself.
Yeah.
And so but when I went to tell her, I stayed at the door of her room. which, by the way, she had previously been trying to get me to go into her room and her come in behind me, which is not something that will ever happen. I don't let people behind me. I have trauma that's just not a thing that ever happens. And that made her mad. So this was, I guess that was first attempt to get me in there, and then that didn't work. So then this is the second one. So I didn't get close to her. So then she picks up a long thumbtack, that she'd taken out of a wall, like that we use them to keep those mosquito nets over the door, to try to keep the bugs out. So then she's holding her arm out, like scratching it like this. And I watch and I'm like, and then of course it starts bleeding. And so then I go to take the tack away, right? Because I'm like, predictable. I realize I probably should have done what the therapist a long time ago told me to do and just walk away and let her do it. But I can't do that. Like, I'm not capable of doing that, I guess. So I went to take it away from her. And when I did, she lets go and she grabs a knife out from under the blankets and she proceeds to attack me. It became a whole thing. So then there's like, so I'm holding her wrist, and calling 911 with the other hand. And it was a whole thing. So ultimately I guess I didn't ever come close enough to her like she had hoped. Right. So when she pulled it out, I was further away from her than expected, I guess. So she wasn't able to actually cut me or stab or whatever. And she tried to kick my bad knee and I was able to react with that. I guess she thinks because I have mobility issues, she expected me to not be able to react or defend as well as I did, to keep her from hurting me. So anyways, do all this, the police come. She knows they'll EOD her. She threatens to harm herself. So she did repeat that to them. And the reason I say that is because there are people who will refuse to repeat their threats when law enforcement is there because they know they will get EOD'd and they don't want to. So right. So I mean that's actually a tactic some people use in order to provide themselves the opportunity to complete. Because if you don't meet the criteria, they won't EOD you, they won't transport you to the hospital or anything like that. But she wanted to be transported to the hospital, so she was, and then she was ultimately EOD'd. She went to acute, and then she stepped down into residential. But she has been consistent through the entire month in residential that if she was to come home, that she would continue to try to harm me and possibly other family members, because her ultimate goal is to be on her own. She has stated she wants to go get into a foster home because then she can blow placement anytime they start telling her no, right? Because you always have the honeymoon period where everything's going great and they're giving you all kinds of stuff. And then when they start cracking down on discipline, and they're like, no, that's not going to happen. No. Then she can blow placement. This is not something she just said one time. This is something she has said many times over the years. She has said, I wish I hadn't agreed to adoption because if I had stayed in foster care, I could do that, like keep flipping through placements. And then when she gets old enough, which she usually estimates at about 16, her plan is to run away because she knows that, so many kids go missing from foster care and aren't found. So that's ultimately her plan. Unless it changes, that's been her stated plan for a very long time. But so what happens is if she's threatening our safety is I can't bring her home. Because if I bring her home, not only does she have the opportunity to follow through with those threats, as mandatory reporters, they have to make child welfare referral for me and have my other child removed because it's a threat to him. It's an unsafe environment for him. During the month that they had her in residential, I talked to every residential treatment facility in the state of Oklahoma, several outside, a bunch of voluntary programs. There were a few that were ready to take her, but they're voluntary. So she said, no, can't take her. So I taught group homes. I had tried a couple of the boarding schools run by the Nations last year, and she had been denied admission to ours based on her being a safety threat to other students. So basically, all resources that are available to me privately, except for the private pay ones that are like $200,000 a year or whatever, I'm not independently wealthy. Those aren't an option. So all of the resources available to me were exhausted. Because I was actually told to put her back in state custody last year by clinicians. It's been over a year that I've been fighting this and trying to find resources. And just, adding extra security at the house and trying to find everything, hoping we could, limp this along until she was old enough to go into transitional services or something. But ultimately, we ended up at a point where Medicaid said they wouldn't pay for her to stay anymore, even though she was continually stating she was a threat to others. And so we kind of were at a point, we ran out the clock. There was no, I still had her, and there's still a referral for her at Pivot, which is a transitional service that will take 15-year-olds, the only one in the state. But they hadn't had any openings come up yet, and I couldn't find any emergency housing or anything to fill that gap of time. There was just nothing left. And so then it's at a point where she can come home and I can lose both kids, or I can refuse to bring her home, have the state take custody, and then she has access to the pool of resources that's set aside for kids in custody, specifically for kids in custody. Right. And I talked to everybody. Apparently, I'm just really fucking stubborn, I guess, because like I said, they've been telling me to do this for a year, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. There has to be another way. But yeah, I've talked to clinicians, I've talked to doctors, I've talked to judges and prosecutors and juvenile services for both the state and my nation, and everybody's like, yep, you've done everything. There's literally nothing left.
Yeah.
So finally, when it came down to it, I told them, okay, I am finally satisfied that every option has been exhausted. I'm going to have to refuse to pick her up. So we did that. Child welfare did come, did an investigation of my home, found no safety risks. So they didn't remove my other children. But they did take custody of her. I went and appeared. I had to testify in court and all of that. The prosecutor was satisfied that I had tried everything. He actually made it clear in his filing that she is a threat, she is a danger to the family, and that I had exhausted everything possible, and that this was the only way to get her the resources that she needs. So I really appreciated that. And the court did place her back into state custody. The judge actually, she had never been involved. This case, this adoption, was done in another part of the state. But she had been involved in the foster case of the older sister. She was the prosecutor on that case. So that was her introduction to the family. But as I said, during that situation, their mother moved down here in order to, get the case transferred and be closer to the kids. Yeah. So because they relocated, then she, as judge, saw mother, grandmother, and uncles all in front of her bench for everything from criminal to child welfare issues. So she was quite familiar with them. So she recognized the consistencies in behavior with the rest of the family. So she actually offered to deviate from normal procedures and go ahead and terminate my rights, my parental rights at that time. Basically, because that makes things more efficient for the state to be able to get her care. Because what happens is when a child's in foster care, things like medical decisions and things, the parents still get consulted and get to sign off on, and it can create delays. So this was a way to make sure they didn't have those delays and they can place her where she needs to be. I still participated in the planning session and what have you for her care. It's just legally this expedites that process and also helps keep it from dragging out and potentially costing my job, because I do work in social services. And that's a concern. Like there's some talk of that in the TikTok thread in the comments about, people can lose their careers because you do get a substantiated child welfare record by doing this. There will always be a substantiated case for neglect of a child on record for me now. They have done a police referral. Hopefully it won't go anywhere, because I was able to prove to the court that I had tried everything. But it does come with the potential of criminal charges in Oklahoma, at least. So yeah, super fun time.
Great.
So it's hard. Yeah, it's hard and it's sad, and I'm terrified for what her future holds. But I mean, that was the case whether she was still in my house or not. Like, I understand she doesn't have normal feel responses, so she doesn't recognize danger. That can lead to all sorts of, awful things happening to them because they don't see the risk that they're taking. So yeah, I'm terrified for her future, but at least for the time being, it gives us a little bit of safety. And
yeah, hopefully with her being far away, maybe she won't want to like come back.
Maybe. And I mean, capitalism is like is a system that can really be used to the benefit of psychopaths. Like, they can become very, very successful. And so, we've tried to like help her understand like how she can direct, the way she processes things to something that will benefit her more and away from hurting people. Hopefully eventually she'll get back there. I don't know. I know statistically it doesn't look great. But right now she's determined that, what's her name? Anna, what was her name? Devaney, whatever.
Yeah.
She watched that and she found it so inspirational. She believes she can scam her way into a life of luxury, but she believes she is smarter than Anna, so she will not get caught and will not go to jail. So, good luck.
Yeah, I don't think so brain development, like, our brains aren't like fully formed until we're like 25.
Mid-20s, yeah. That's when it's done. Like, after that, it's all decline.
Yeah. I feel the decline already.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, like, what her brain development will be like as she gets older.
I don't know. And that's the question, right? Like, I think a lot of this, and that's what I keep trying to get people to understand, is a lot of this is rooted in normal age-appropriate development, right? Like, it's every 15-year-old thinks they can go adult, right?
Better than everybody, like.
Right. And then, but then you couple that with a lack of attachment or empathy. It can take a very, like, because hyperlogically, what she says, what she thinks makes sense. So hopefully, she's on target, essentially, developmentally, right? So maybe as her brain matures, she'll be more inclined to be like, okay, I get more benefit working with people than, beating them into submission, so to speak.
Hopefully the critical
Hopefully.
thinking develops like after like being in situations and having to like experience life like away from you. Maybe like the critical thinking, like you said, of like if I work with people, they will do more for me. And I can
Hopefully. I
do
mean,
things.
we had buy-in with that concept for years. It's just been in the last 6 months that she's been saying things like, people with empathy are just limited, and I don't want to be limited like that, and not. So it's only been the last 6 months, although, like I said, statistically, there was one account that commented on that and actually gave the numbers, and it doesn't look great. They said, honestly, with her age, she's more likely than not to get worse than better. But, actually, I think what they said was the odds of her going back to that idea of, doing things in a more positive way is like getting struck twice by lightning in the same day. So we're just gonna hope for a miracle to make myself feel better, I guess. I don't know, but I I still am advocating for her and trying to do the best I can, but unfortunately, what I want everyone to understand is that there needs to be better systems. Like, I've been talking to families who are struggling with this all over the world, and nobody has a good model or a good system to keep families safe and provide resources and services while they're in their home. And so a lot of times it does come down to this. And I know there are people who have made the comments that I gave up on her and whatever, which
It's
I
not
think
giving
is
up when you've tried everything. Like,
right. And I think that's really a harmful thing to say for other people who are going through this. Like, I don't really take it personally because because I've had a lot of fucking therapy. And so I can not internalize all of this anymore. But I think there's a lot of people who are in vulnerable places that can be really harmful to. Like, making sure she is in a safe place where she can get access whatever resources are left is the opposite of giving up on her. It's trying to, I could have kicked her out into the world and made her live on the street, which a lot of families do for various reasons. That's giving up on her. I'm trying to make sure she has access and also preventing her from committing a crime that would have permanent consequences. Like, and also keeping us all safe. Like, this was simply the only option left that protects everybody.
And not everybody has access to like the same kinds of resources that you would have access to, like knowing how the legal system works and knowing like how child welfare works. Like, generally,
yes.
Like, a lot of people don't have that knowledge and don't know how to look for it. So like,
yes, I cannot imagine.
Like,
I cannot imagine how awful this entire process would have been if I hadn't spent all these years in social work, and so I have connections to call and say, hey, how does this work? What does this look like? Or if I didn't have the training to read and understand the law and policy, because like there is no place to go to get the information in a way that makes sense if you haven't been trained in legalese. Like, it just isn't there. Yeah, and I can't imagine, and my heart breaks for families that are dealing with this all the time, because like I said, I've been networking with these families and I hear their stories and I'm just like, oh, it's horrific. And I'm thankful for the resources that we have had, but they're simply not accessible to everybody.
Yeah, and it should be. There should be like way more like available, but the mental health care system in the United States is shitty at best. Like,
yes. And I think particularly when we're talking about psychopathy, there is a lack of public will to acknowledge, first of all, its existence. There seems to be a huge amount of resistance to believing that people can be born with psychopathy. And I think a lot of that is rooted in fear because if they're born that way, then, it's an inevitability. We can't fix it, right? We can't fix it. And I think it scares people. And so it's a lot easier to dismiss it and say, we're not going to talk about it, or we're just going to pretend that it's the same as this or that, or, we're going to blame the parents as if the blame fixes anything, right? Like, even if it was something that they did, well, that doesn't change the fact that we need a system to help provide resources and research. There is research currently that has been happening with things like oxytocin therapy that seems to be showing promising results, but there's not enough. There's nowhere near enough resources going into into research, and there needs to be, and that's part of why I've been as forthcoming as I have been on talking about this, because it's a huge, this is a public health matter that we really need to, and I was actually discussing yesterday with someone that I know that works on the federal level with in policy, and like, this is something we need to do, but we can't even get a universal health care in this country. I don't know what the hell we're going to be able to do.
Yeah, that seems like a first step, like getting people health care and then having mental health care be a part of that. Like, that seems like a good step.
Right, which this is a whole other show that we could turn that into. Yeah. But why is mental health care, vision, and dental separated out from healthcare coverage?
Like, it's health. Like, why does health need to be split into different things? Like, it's your whole person. Like, I don't.
Each one inner affects. That's the word I'm looking for. Each one affects the other. Sorry, guys. Like, my brain has only been firing on one cylinder lately. This has been a whole lot. I almost cried over nothing this morning. Like, my son was saying something and we were having a conversation, and then suddenly he's like, wait, what? He didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know what he was talking about. I don't know. We were having two different conversations thinking we were talking about the same thing. And I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. And I start crying, and he comes and hugs me. He's like, I don't even know what we're talking about. But that's where we are.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And to be sure you never miss an upload, make sure you turn your notifications on. And please come join us on social media so we can continue these conversations in between episodes. You'll find us at Hypoxia Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.